Welcome to the Amazon Legends podcast, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became powerful sellers, also experts specializing in helping sellers, and both former and current Amazon employees who will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here's your host, Nick Urison.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today spent several years leading strategic efforts at UPS and Home Depot, but his focus was combining the needs of e-commerce and logistics with the traditional retail. So this is just a little bit of something that he is good at. This guy is a powerhouse. You're gonna see in a second. So this obviously in this day and age, retail is losing a lot of market share to online retail, but online retail comes with its challenges in terms of logistics. So he spent a long time in these two humongous companies figuring that out. He also mentors e-commerce companies with Techstars, and Techstars is a worldwide incubator of tech companies. So he's a mentor there. So currently, he's the strategy director at Dragonfly, which acquires Amazon brands and grows them for scale. And when he's not working, I don't know how he's finding time, but he's passionate about performing arts to the extent that he actually serves on the board of a nonprofit called Fly on the Wall. So, like I said, he must find another 2-3 hours a day on top of the 24 hours. So we'll hear from him now. So with everybody, meet my guest, Drayton Hilton. Welcome to the show, Drayton.
Thank you, Nick. Great to be here. And quick correction, just because we recently hired a director, I'm a strategy manager at a Dragonfly Commerce. So just want to have that settled, but I appreciate the compliment.
Oh, well, I mean, look, you know, it's, yeah, we know who you are in terms of everything that you've done. So we're going to learn more about it. So now, since you are the strategy person and knowing, it's one thing to be the strategy person, but it's another to know everything that happens on the ground. So you obviously are intimately familiar with what happens on the ground when you are launching or growing a brand. So with that in mind, and the current economic conditions, as we record this in October of 2022 with high inflation and everything else and slowdown in e-commerce. So tell me something that you are doing to drive growth despite everything.
Definitely, Nick. We're getting out of our comfort zone.
So what would be the comfort zone?
The comfort zone is keeping our business in the US and trying to optimize there and win there is how we could define our comfort zone today.
Okay, so in other words, it's the standard operation, launch, right. Maybe extend the product lines a little bit, or cut prices, what most people do when times getting hard, or optimize more. A lot of aggregators I hear, they are focusing on two things, operational efficiency and profitability. So they are trying to renegotiate costs and things like that, and cut out some of the fat in terms of their advertising maybe. So that's what I see. So in your case, you're doing something different.
That's right.
Tell us what that is.
That's right. So we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. So within the same view of trying to reduce costs and trying to find optimizations and simplicity there, we're also looking to continue to grow our brands. And one of those ways is through European expansion.
Okay. So European expansion in other marketplaces or Amazon European sites?
Starting with Amazon, but definitely open to other marketplaces as the opportunity is more defined.
Okay, so walk us through, how does a company launch in a European market? By the way, give us, why not Canada? Why Europe?
Right, right. So I'll start with that question. Why Europe and not Canada? For the most part, we are in Canada as well. Canada is frankly table stakes. It's a lot easier to get into Canada from the US than it is from the US into Europe. There are similar cultural nuances. There are similar languages, a couple of differences because of the French language in Canada, but for the most part, because of the economic relationship between the US and Canada, fairly easy to go in and out of Canada. A lot of services are available. But with Europe is one of the largest Western economies that presents one of the greater opportunities in terms of lower competition, right? So US to Europe is very difficult, and anyone who can overcome that challenge is able to access a market that's typically not accessible by their competitors. So that's a big piece of why Europe it's a large market, being a very mature e-commerce world and a very high income area, but also lower competition from a US standpoint because they just don't have the simplicity of access as the US to Canada does.
Okay, so as far as the comparison, I don't know the answer to this question. European market versus Canadian market, which one has a bigger volume?
Bigger volume is going to be the European market mostly because you have so many countries part of it, right? You have the UK, which is a separate country due to Brexit, which is already in itself probably a third to a fourth of the European economy as a whole. And then within the EU itself, you have these major players, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, in addition to downstream countries like the Czech Republic and Poland that are all in their own way large e-commerce opportunities with high growth expectations in the future as more customers adopt these digital services.
Okay, so let's now dissect this issue, because this is, I mean, right off the bat, if you're gonna expand, you've been selling in the US and you want to go into an international market, you may as well jump in a bigger market, because you're gonna have a much, even though the share may be smaller, you're gonna have a bigger amount of sales coming in. So, so instead of going to Canada, it's best to head for the European market. However, there is no Amazon Europe, right? So it's all split. So where do you start?
That's right. So I'll add additional color to your earlier statement about you might as well start in Europe versus Canada. And the additional color I'll add is, yes, there is the how big is the market. There's also the effort to get into the market. So Canada's very easy to get into, but Europe's very hard to get into. And so it's always great to start with the easy to get to countries, start to get a lot of quick revenue and success, and then expand to these harder countries because of that lift. So now to your question about the marketplaces, that's a part of that challenge. So with Amazon, for those who aren't familiar, has a marketplace for each individual country. So you have a UK marketplace, German marketplace, etc. The service or value that you get from Europe that you don't get in other countries is for countries that are part of the European Union. So this is, for the most part, all of Western Europe, ex the UK, you have access to each of those countries with no additional costs or challenges. If your product is approved in Germany, it's approved in Poland. If it's approved in Poland, it's approved in France. And so once you get over that initial difficulty of getting into that market, you have access to all those countries around. As they grow and as they shrink, you have a lot more diversity in your marketplaces.
Okay, so would you advocate for getting into one of the European Union countries, or UK, or both?
I would say UK. The reason being is UK is English speaking, so there's already a shared language there. In addition, you don't have to worry about the localization concern, so making your creative products and your copy native to that local language. And in addition, the UK is already such a large market that winning in the UK already positions you very well to win in the overall European market. Similar to, as we say in the US kind of drives the overall way the world goes. The UK is similar for the European market. It's a good barometer for how successful you'll be.
I see. So so launch in the UK. So there are two aspects of this. One is obviously getting set up as an organization, or I should say as the seller, because there are all kinds of regulations for entities, right? So taxes and blah, blah. And then we have the listing specific regulation. So walk us through those. So what does a seller need in order to start selling in the UK?
Definitely. So the seller needs two key things at all times, and then everything else below is dependent on your product category. Those two are a VAT ID, or value added tax ID. This allows you to pay taxes and be recognized as a business in the local country. You need that by country. So if you want to sell in the UK, Germany, etc., you need a VAT ID in all of those. And the second is an importer of record. So unless you have a business local in those countries, you need someone there who will sign off on your behalf as a responsible party for your product. And, you know, the quick and dirty there is, if you sell a water bottle into the UK and you ship it from the US and it goes to the UK is going to say, okay, this water bottle is this tax, pay me my taxes. Okay, fine, here's your tax. Then the UK says, okay, well, if this water bottle goes somewhere else or is sells somewhere else, who's going to be the person I call up to make me whole for those differences in taxes and the changes and any issues that arise? That's your importer of record. So your importer of record is, for the most part, a entity who's contractually responsible to you in the US for your products in that market.
So I am just a guy, happens to be a creative kind of guy, and he came up with this product idea of this disappearing water bottle. Okay, so it's going with the water bottle idea, and I'm selling that on Amazon US, of course, and it's a great product. I'm doing well. So I don't know anybody in the UK. I don't, you know, now I want to go into the UK market. Who's going to be the importer of record on my behalf?
Yeah, so there are a few options, and I'll go with the hardest options, and I'll give you the answer for Amazon sellers today to figure it out. So the hard option is you find a distributor or a family member, cousin, neighbor, you know, neighbor's neighbor who lives in the UK, who will say, yep, I'll act on your behalf, Nick. I'll be your importer of record for your disappearing water bottle, and we'll get it into Amazon or another warehouse and be good to go. Very hard, because if you have, say, you go from 1 unit, it's fine. 1 million units, your friend is sitting at the border day and night trying to sign off on paperwork, right? So that's just not feasible. The answer now is you have to find a compliance service provider through the Amazon Seller Partner Network. It's a service Amazon provides. You could find Amazon approved vendors in that market who can help you navigate those issues. And those are great services, because not only will it give you that importer of record, it can also help you with compliance issues, classifications to make sure you pay the right import taxes, as well as the VAT ID I mentioned earlier, making sure you fill out the right paperwork and have the right support you need to get into those markets.
So let's say that this disappearing water bottle I manufacture in China, I bring it into the US, I pay the duty, taxes, everything, and now it's here. Now I want to send part of the inventory to the UK. What kind of duty and taxes are applicable to it?
Well, the same duties and taxes for the UK specifically. So if you were to send it from China to the UK or the US to the UK, it would be the same duties and tax as defined by the UK. Her Majesty's Royal Customs is what they call the group there, which I always found fun, because it's very much calling to their roots, right? Their royal roots, so to speak. And so the duties will be based on the product. So it's a water bottle. There's a specific duty for water carrying devices, we'll call them. And then a tax is a VAT tax, so they like to charge the sales tax within the retail of the product. So that's about 20% of the retail is going to be the VAT. And so you declare all of that to the UK government. They have a quick and dirty math where they say, okay, this is the duty, this is the VAT. You pay that at import, and then it gets into the market. And then the idea is when you sell the product, you'll get that money back. So it kind of balances itself out.
Yeah. Okay. So I lived in the UK for a long time.
Okay.
So as it happens, I can tell you all about this back business, but I'll get to it in a second. But there's one important point here. So if you are importing something, I mean, now that UK is not part of the European Union,
that's right,
it may not apply. But there is one thing that give it a totally different perspective. If you are not a US citizen, but you move to the United States, and then let's say you inherit something in your home country and you pay the taxes on it, whatever inheritance. When you bring the proceeds into the US, if you are not a US citizen, you pay zero tax because they avoid double taxation. They don't want double taxation. So, but if you are a US citizen, every penny that lands here, you have to pay. So unfortunately, that's one reason not to be a US citizen if you are a foreigner. But so does that apply the same way for duty? So if I'm buying from China, I brought it all the way from China into the US, paid the taxes. Now those cleared merchandise, taxes, duty and taxes fully paid, now finding its way into the UK. UK taxes it or applies duty again, or do you get some kind of credit for what was paid in the US?
You don't get any credit for what was paid in the US. So that's kind of the net there. But there is a credit you receive for paying the taxes up front to the UK or other European countries. And so when you pay the VAT up front for the UK and then you sell it later, right, the net is that VAT is canceled out.
Okay,
right?
so that's
there's
the
that.
second part.
Right.
Yeah, so now as it happens, I used to be in transportation, so I can tell you all about this. So they had it's HM Customs and Excise. So customs will apply these excise duties, and they are nothing to do with anything other than whatever you're bringing in. There is a rate, you pay it, that's it. Yeah. That's a cost. VAT, on the other hand, is something that constantly circulates, unlike the sales tax in the United States. So basically, what the regulation says is government must have X%. I believe it was 17.5%. Is it 20% now?
It depends on the country. So Germany, I think, is like 20%. UK is like a little cheaper, maybe 18%.
Yeah. So let's call it 20%. So the government says, I am supposed to get 20% of what the consumer pays on this product. So, well, I am the wholesaler, and the government says, well, Mr. Wholesaler, you're buying $1,000 worth of merchandise, you have to pay me 20% of it up front. But when you sell it, then you can charge the VAT to the end user. So now you buy it for 1,000, you sell it for 2,000. Now you charge VAT on the 2,000. So you collect it, obviously, more than what you paid, and comes the end of quarter or month, whenever you are declaring, you say, okay, this is how much I paid out, and this is how much I collected. And the difference I owe the government, and you write the check. So that's the way it kind of circulated. And of course, that's an advantage. But what happens if you export? Then you're not collecting, then you get a refund, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's the magic of taxation in a way, which is if you keep it in the country. A good example is if you import into Germany, but you sell in France, import into Germany, and in some cases you'll pay the VAT upfront to Germany, but if it ends up selling in France last, they'll refund you the delta. So Germany will refund you your money, and then France will charge you the money that's due to them. In some cases, you can bypass the German VAT by going straight to France. In general, it takes a bit of some know-how to pull that off, but to your point, as long as you're paying taxes to the end country of sale, you're in good standing. But if you don't pay taxes to the end country of sale, or if you don't represent the retail price you plan to pay honestly to the government, that's where they start to claw back that VAT tax on the back end.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this was one of the things, you know, I wasn't born in this country. So when I came over and we're doing the books, I'd taken over a company. And so what happened in the financials, I created a control account to track the sales tax that I was paying. And they said, but why are you doing that? And I said, well, that's tax. We're going to claim it, right? So I said, no, not in the US. You don't claim the sales tax. It's a cost.
That's right.
I said, so what is it? I said, well, 8%, 9%, depending on the state. And I said, that's a cost. I said, you got to be kidding me. This cannot be. I'm telling you, I struggled for like 2 years accepting that the fact that I had to pay taxes on sales tax that I cannot claim. So
Yeah.
it was, but in Europe, that's not the case. Any VAT that you pay, you claim. It comes right off whatever you collected. And then, you know, if you never collect any, let's say, for example, and we used to do this because I was in that kind of business. We were always importing and exporting. So on the importation, we would pay the VAT, and then we would export to outside European Union. There is no tax, there is no VAT. I'm not charging anybody. Then we would simply claim on every single quarter. We would have thousands of pounds being claimed. All we had to do was just add the export certificate. So you have to, when you export it, you get a certificate, and on every shipment, the invoice is attached, and then it gets stamped by the customs and excise people. So if there is any audit or anything, you say, look, I bought so much and I sold so much, and then here's the difference, but so much of it went exported, you know, so there was no collection. So that's a huge advantage for Europe. But as you said, it does take tracking and accounting and everything else, right?
Yeah, and also
So,
it takes really quick there, it takes a different way of thinking, because in the US, we're very used to retail price $19.99. I take $19.99 less my cost of goods marketing, that's mine, because taxes are paid on the back end by the customer. But in Europe, it's okay, I'm selling it for $19.99, so I take home $19.99 less the cost of goods marketing. It's like, no, you take home $19.99 less cost of goods marketing and 20% VAT. So there's a little less margin you get per sale in Europe because of the VAT up front that is taken off, and then you take it back when you pay it up front, because it's a net zero cost overall, right? You pay to the government, you sell it, you kind of take it back, so it's net flat. But often as a US company in those markets, we end up trying to price it like the US, especially with the euro and the USD being similar, but we don't take into account that, oh, the tax is coming out of my retail price. It's not being applied to the customer after the fact.
Okay, so this is a very important point. So let's dissect this a little bit, because you're right in terms of thinking. You know, it has to be different thinking. So when I came to the US many years ago, the sales tax was a big deal for me, because I'm not really one of those people who love to favor paying taxes. I'm high taxes,
right?
Also, as a business, you know, it's the responsible thing to do, to make sure that you structure everything the right way so that you avoid extra expenses. Nobody wants to have extra costs. So, but that mentality was the first thing that I found different. So in the US, when you see a product, it's always so much plus sales tax, because sales tax has nothing to do with the product itself. So people understand. So when you see something, you look at the price, and then you know there's going to be, depending on which state you are in, you're going to add X% sales tax. So as the seller, you assign the price as the price that you want for the sale of the item. Tax and everything else goes on top. But in Europe, the price that people see in the window, that includes the VAT, right? They don't want, nobody, if you ever say to anybody in Europe, you know, this is, I don't know, 50 pounds plus VAT, they're gonna run. That's not how they operate, right?
Absolutely.
So, plus there is one other thing, there is the discount. So if you apply a coupon code, for example, you do not apply it to the tax part. Tax part, you apply the tax after the coupon is, it gets complicated. So the bottom line, for listeners' benefit, the price you assign in Europe includes the VAT. The price you assign in the US does not include the VAT.
That's right.
So whatever selling price you calculate, you add the VAT on, that's what you sell it for. But the price that, the product, when you import it into the country, you pay the VAT portion of it upfront, except depending on how it is being imported. In other words, if you, right? I mean, we're really getting into the nitty-gritty, but that's where the cash is, right?
It is, and you see, and I think as you explain it, I'm laughing because you're explaining the complexity of it all, right? How do you make sense of it all? I mean, all this taxation, paying it up front, paying it later, grabbing it back, getting it reclaimed. I import it, I pay. I export it, I get it back. I have to include the tax in the price. What does that mean? It's a great deal of work. And that's once you're in the market. It has nothing to do with getting the VAT ID set up, getting the import of record set up, getting the compliance for your products in place so that you're in line with the European Union country requirements and the UK requirements, which are now post-Brexit different, slightly different, but different enough that it could lead to a number of fines and challenges.
So Drey, I have a question for you. So this is also a significant question. So you said that on Amazon selling partner network, blah, blah, they have these compliance companies. So the fundamental question to me is, you are importing, let's say I sold my, disappearing water bottles, 1,000 pieces, I sent to the UK. I'm going to sell it, including VAT, on Amazon UK marketplace for, let's say, 12 pounds each. Okay. Includes VAT.
Yep.
How much am I importing it for? Am I also billing myself the same at $10 because I'm going to pay the VAT?
Yep.
Or am I selling it at a different cost? What is the relationship there?
So that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Is in the perfect world, you want one price for the entire world, right? If it's $10 in the US, and let's say the euro is 1-to-1, then it's $10 in Germany, and let's say the pound's a little bit extra, so it's $12 in the UK. Ideally, you want the same synonymous price because you should have the same cost base. But as we spoke to earlier, the VAT gets included, which is actually kind of a higher cost to the customer, even though it might be the same net. But then the other piece is the importer of record fee, which can be anywhere from 2 to 5% of the retail value. So for that $10 bottle, you're paying another, 50 cents just to import it. Then you have the shipment, so shipping by freight from one country to another. We do that from China to the US all the time, so that's just a cost you have to accept. But it does vary if you're going from China to the UK or China to Germany. There's some delta there. And then there's the customs clearance prices, which again, similar to the US, you have to pay a brokerage fee to clear the goods there, but the pricing is going to vary a bit because it's not all the same. So because of those nuanced prices downstream, freight, import of record, and customs compliance and clearance, you do have to think, okay, I have to build these costs in because these costs are unique to this country.
Right. So really, at the end of the day, this operation in another market becomes a whole separate entity.
Yeah.
And I just don't know the answer to the question in a way that you can just simply outsource. You have to go set up your own entity and frankly declare whatever the returns are on monthly, quarterly basis, and then run another set of books. Because frankly, you are in the business of making money, right? Otherwise, it would be
Absolutely.
charity. So we are in the business of buying for $10 from China and then selling it for ideally $25, $30. And then in the process, let's say you sell it for 25, you made $15 profit. You pay the overheads, you pay all the costs associated with it, and then you net maybe, I don't know, $7, $8 you put in your pocket, and then you pay government the taxes, you're done. So the bottom line is you pay $10 for the importation of the product. So now you sending the item to the UK, you're gonna have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So you sell it for $10 to the US entity, UK entity, and the UK entity will factor all those costs in and then price it at something. And then in the process, what are the pros? The pros are, first of all, you're not going to pay as high VAT as you would on the selling price. So whatever VAT you pay up front, you're going to recoup when the product is sold, but the selling price is much higher, so that's okay. And then you pay the difference to the government. And when it's all settled, you're going to have a profit. And that's the strategic decision. Where do you accumulate the profits? In the US or in the other marketplace? So if you are using an outsourced party, you cannot really do this, right? Because it's not your company. So it becomes, to me, a strategic question. How do I set this up? For the sake of convenience, you have all this, these companies doing things. But really, do you really want to go that route? Because these things are also coming your way, right? So what is your take on this?
Yeah, it's to your first point about you have to make it a separate business. Yes, absolutely. I think to view the UK and other markets as, oh, I'll just lift and shift from the US is the wrong way to approach it. You really need to approach it as, I have a disappearing water bottle and I want to sell it in the UK, or I want to sell it in Germany. And what does it take to do that and start from ground zero, with the advantage that you have this profit center called the US who can serve as your venture capital, so to speak. Now, to your next question around, you have these outsourced partners, they have all their fees and their setup, and you have to feed that in to the costs. And does that make you competitive in those markets compared to other players in that market who are probably taking less profit than you'd be comfortable with if you compare to the US? Or do you set up your own operation, which could, to your point, not pay all those fees in terms of import of record, and you probably get a deal on customs clearance and compliance, but then you open this door of risk of, if you don't meet the requirements of those countries. I think we're all very familiar when it comes to European Union and UK, they have very stringent policies around following their import laws, and they're very quick to do fines and on large businesses and smaller businesses. So where I land is, you want to start outsourcing because you want to move quickly and you want to move successfully. And over time, you want to define what can be insourced and drive cost savings. and what has to remain outside the company and for how long. So for example, your disappearing water bottle, you're going to pay compliance fees up front. You're going to pay importer of record fees up front, and you're going to pay VAT forever. You know, all constants, death, and taxes. Can't avoid taxes. But if you find that it's very successful in that market, well, you don't have to pay compliance forever because you already have that product compliant. So take what you know, put that into a data room somewhere, and use that for the UK moving forward and have it in the background. On the flip side, you start an entity locally in the UK. That saves you importer of record fees because you just make your entity in the UK responsible. It also saves you downstream other fees like a responsible party, which is basically a regulation where they want someone who's physically local that will hold a sample of the product and will provide various investigative needs to make sure the product is compliant. You have an entity in the UK, you save costs there, you save costs of importer of record, and you save costs on customs clearance because you can build that in-house. But for you to get there, you have to build the learnings from the outsourced partner. You then have to hire within someone who is expert enough to navigate those challenges and can escalate those issues when appropriate. But until you get to that point, I definitely would say you want to outsource for speed and then over time optimize for cost.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is so savvy way of doing things, mainly because you can't be getting into all the individual, nitty-gritty of
Yeah.
how to launch in a different market. You just outsource, but go in knowing that if this becomes a significant volume, it's only a temporary solution.
Yeah.
So until you know where it's going, it's okay to outsource, but go in prepared that if this scales, then you're going to have to set up your own company, set up your own thing. So that's the way to approach it. It's kind of like we were talking in another episode about virtual bundles on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a new feature, and it's like that. They are great for testing, but you must start knowing that you're going to have to go into production to create bundles or packs if it's selling successfully, because virtual is really not the way to go, mainly because your FBA fee is double or triple depending on how many you're putting in the pack. This is exactly the same model. So I'd say that's the way to go. Okay, so we covered the entity. I mean, I wanted to spend time on this because especially the point you made on pricing is so valuable. And I didn't think about this until now, but I remember when I came over, it was like a major, I mean, I'm telling you, it took me 2 years just to think that, okay, if I buy something, I see sales tax on the invoice, I'll just lump it with the cost. It took me 2 years to actually start doing that. I was thinking all along, no, something is wrong. I have to be able to claim this. No, not in the US. So
for all the conveniences, we do make paying for things very inconvenient in comparison to our European cohorts, right? When I was in Australia, I loved that I could pay $2 for a lemon soda. And even though you think $2 for a soda, that's insane. But in the US, $1.50, $1.75, you're going to get probably $2 and some change. So it was nice to know that what was on the sticker was the price.
Yeah. So Europe is like that. So for anybody traveling to any one of the European Union countries or UK, when you buy something in stores, whatever you're paying includes VAT. So when you are leaving the country in the airport, keep the receipt and get that stamped, and then they will send you the check back, or they'll pay you back. Because what you are doing is you are exporting it, right? You bought it in the country and you are exporting it. So they are going to reimburse. So that's the nice thing about VAT. I mean, there's nothing nice about taxes, unfortunately, but at least with VAT, it's okay. It doesn't hurt the business in the end. Because whatever you buy, this is the price you pay, you add the VAT and you price it that way, and that's it. and it's a much better way.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want to spend just a little bit of time on the listing compliance. So how
Mm.
should a seller go about making sure that the product that I'm selling is compliant, that won't get me in trouble?
Definitely. So again, the Amazon Seller Partner Network is the best place to start because you can find a compliance partner who has an expertise in that market, who can look at your product and figure out, oh, here are the requirements for your product. Unfortunately, unless you have the time and a law degree to do it on your own, it is just too big a challenge, especially if you look beyond the disappearing water bottle into 10 or 12 other different product types.
Yeah. Okay, so find somebody and they will tell you. So this is important for several things. I mean, for starters, it's important to define the excise, as
Mhm.
they call how much you're gonna pay in duty. In other words, what
Yeah.
is the rate? So you will get a tariff number. They call it harmonized.
Yeah.
So
The 12-digit code. Yep.
yeah. And it's not UPC, everybody. Don't think it's UPC. It will determine. So, and this is another thing. So don't just buy into it. Also do your little bit of study, because there could be different tariff numbers that may actually be more relaxed,
Mhm.
except the definition of it. So this is where the product specs come into play. I'll give you an example. When I was over there working, it was subject to quota to import T-shirts
Hmm.
because they didn't want to flood the market. Europe is very protectionist, so they
Yeah.
want to protect. So unlike US, so they had quota. How many T-shirts could be imported from each country around the world into the UK? So what is the definition of a T-shirt? This is very important. What happened was, it was if the T-shirt had a length of over 76 centimeters,
Mm.
which is about 50 inches, then it would be considered night dress, because it was assumed who would wear a long T-shirt, right? Mostly women to bed. So that was the assumption. So if a T-shirt was 50 inches or more, it's no longer a T-shirt. Guess what? There was no quota for night dresses. So what we did, we made our T-shirts 50.5 inches.
Wow.
So unpaid and required no nothing. All it needed was a license, and the license was free. You would just
Mhm.
apply and get a license, and then when the merchandise arrived, you would submit the license with it, and then off you go. But if it was quota, good luck, because now you have to line up, get your
Mm.
share. You're limited to your share and things like that. So for those who want to sell to the European countries, whatever you get in terms of tariff that your product belongs to, just look around the neighboring tariffs and see if there are some flexibilities you can actually comply with. You're not doing anything wrong. All you are
Right.
doing is you're changing your product spec, and that way you can avoid some, because this one is a hard cost. There's no question. You have to pay that. That becomes part of your cost, right? So that's my experience. Have you ever run into anything like that?
You know, um, in my previous life, we saw it constantly where um, when businesses didn't want to pay for a compliance expert, they would go with the other tariff code, right? So they say, other, it's other, right? It's not, nothing still perfectly fits. And so a good amount of product gets through under the other tariff code. But if the customs group ever does an audit, that's when the trouble starts. They say, oh, this is an other, this is a chrome infused, blah, 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 right? On the flip side, to your example, making it 50 and a half inches, 55 and a half inches, that is definitely an option. But I think for a lot of businesses, the challenge there is, even once you have that knowledge, if your product doesn't fit that code, then you have to ask yourself, what's the cost to change my product to fit that code? And what is the net value to me for paying a lower
Yes.
duties and tariff tax? It becomes
Yeah.
a very challenging calculus, because then there's a whole cost of changing your product potentially, and how that impacts your US market. And, you know, you really want to avoid change as much as possible for the sake of the costs. But change is at times a fee you have to pay for growth.
Yeah. So there is this great saying that I always, cite whenever there's a situation in business. Think global, but act local,
Mhm.
right? So you may have a great product, and for the US market, it may work with certain specs, but in the European market, it may be different specs. And those specs are all about satisfying demand, and the demand is going to dictate what you can do and you cannot do. There is one other thing just that I want to share now that I haven't discussed this kind of stuff for such a long time. It's funny. Brings me a lot of memories. But one of the things that we did was this night dress versus t-shirt was a big deal.
Mhm.
So what we would do is, and this was actually my job, I would go make an appointment with the customs officer. This is in their head office, nothing to do with shipments or anything. This is like high level regulatory. Not many people did this because usually people were afraid of those those officers. So I would make an appointment, and this with an expert, a tariff expert.
Mhm.
They have people designated for that kind of stuff. So I would take the product and go see one of those people, and I will put it on the table and say, look, this is the product, and we believe this is the tariff that applies to it. Would you agree? And then, do you have any recommendations? And the goal was to get the person to say, yes, this qualifies for this tariff. Then I would get a letter, an official letter saying that this is a night dress. So from time to time, our shipments would get flagged for inspection. Well, guess what? Not every customs officer thinks the same, right?
That's
So
right.
somebody will say, this is a t-shirt. I don't care, right? That letter would clear it instantly. So getting that official clearance from a tariff expert was a big deal for us. So it's just one of those things. Anything you can do, obviously, to make life easy, because
Mhm.
otherwise inspection means, it's going to be delayed for starters. And then, they may suddenly say, oh, no, now you have to pay the duty and the taxes. And then it's one thing to fight things when they become an issue rather than, ahead of time having it all cleared. So it was, those were the days.
Right.
So this was great, Drayton. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're based in Atlanta, right?
Mhm.
So
That's
tell
right.
us, where you grew up?
So it's a funny story. I don't think I can't say I grew up anywhere really. So I spent, adolescence in Miami, Florida. Spent uh, junior high and high school in Atlanta, and then spent my college and early career years in New York City, because before coming back to Atlanta. So I've pretty much went up and down the East Coast, and then decided to make my home here in Atlanta because my family decided to settle here. My wife's family's here, so my wife went to Georgia Tech, and so that's what led me to leave New York and come to Atlanta, and try to start something here.
So what was the reason for traveling all over as a kid?
So uh, my mother was a single parent and an educator. So she was a teacher at a high school, and in Miami, the pay for teachers just didn't compare to the pay for teachers in Georgia. So for a better life, we moved from Florida to Georgia, and then I had spent my entire life in the Southeast. My family had spent their entire life in the Southeast, and so I wanted to see seasons, as I put it. And so went to New York City, went to NYU. And in my first year, I had Hurricane Sandy and Winter Storm Nemo. So I got snow, I got a power outage, and I got a hurricane, the likes people haven't seen in that area for some time. So I think I got what I was looking for, so to speak.
Yeah, so you saw enough of it and you said that's
Yes.
it. So one of the things that I'm always curious about, because there is I don't know if you've heard this term, but uh, people who spend more of their adult years outside of their parents' culture,
Mm.
they are called third culture kids. Have you ever heard that
No, this is new.
phrase? Third culture kid. It's TCK for short.
Mhm.
So your typical TCK is a military brat, because as you know, military parents, they travel around all the time. They're constantly changing. So what happens to those kids? And this is really what I'm getting at. I wonder if this is you. Since you keep moving around, you make friends, and the next thing is you're somewhere else. Now you have to make new friends, and then new friends and new friends. So gaining and losing friends becomes part of your whole psychology, and then how you approach the friendships that you make.
Mm.
Is that something you experienced as you moved from one place to the other?
Oh, definitely. I mean, as you are a kid, right? You have your elementary friends who it's your entire world. You have your elementary friends, you have your church friends, you have your cousins who are nearby because your family, some families around. Then you move to an entirely different culture. So even though it's the Southeast, Miami, Florida versus Atlanta, Georgia, it's a very different world. Miami has a fairly dominant Cuban culture, a lot of Spanish as a second language spoken, and a lot of strong cultural dynamics there. And then Atlanta is very much the typical Southern city, right? You have a fairly large African American population with its own historical civil rights movements, et cetera. And then New York City, which is the center of the world, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
being in those dynamics, making friends in each of those different cultural groups, it was definitely a through line where I made very close relationships, and over time had to learn how to maintain those relationships, and then also have to accept the end of various relationships for things that are out of my control.
So, I had a gentleman on the podcast. His name is Mark Toman. He's a great gentleman. He owns a venture capital firm. At the time we spoke, he had 21 companies in his portfolio. So we were discussing, because what I found in our conversation, he was constantly pivoting,
Mm.
like business models, lifestyles. That he says, well, decided to live over here, decided to live over there. So during the conversation, I picked up this thing that perhaps this is in his nature.
Mm.
And I asked him, when you were a kid, did you like move around quite a bit? He said, oh, my father was a diplomat. And there you go.
Wow, there you go.
So in your case, you see, what I'm seeing from you is this. First of all, you start logistics, retail, Home Depot, UPS. Now you are in Amazon space.
Mm-hmm.
Except it's not your typical Amazon space. You are in the European operation. You're constantly taking on these new things. And a lot of people think twice about it. Then it's outside their comfort zone. You started the conversation by going outside the comfort zone, right? So do you think that resilience for you as a kid, moving around, constantly losing friends and then making new friends, kind of prepared you for this kind of life?
I would say it did, in combination to being an only child as well. So I was an only child with a single parent who moved around a lot. So I didn't really have I didn't have siblings to bounce off of or share the experience. It's very a singular solitude experience of, as a kid, processing these things, making decisions. And I think because I was looking for siblings within friendships I made and then losing those friendships because we had to move, I think that did build a sense of perseverance, but I think it also built a sense of wander, which could also be seen as a form of getting bored quickly. So I like to tell people, I can do hard things very well. It's the easy things that give me trouble, because the hard things require you go really deep in, you focus and commit aggressively, and you stand on a position and you fight for that position. The easy things are, well, yeah, it's just common sense, just press the red button. And for me, it can't be that easy.
Everything for you is because life hasn't been easy for you, so it doesn't come natural to you. Say, wait a minute, there must be something. What's the catch, right?
Yeah, I
So,
used to a really quick story there. I remember I started off my career in management consulting, and I had a principal who was a kind of a soft mentor to me, and he had this thing where he would always say, I'm trying to figure out how they're trying to screw me over. Not his language, not the word he chose, but that's the net experience. How are they trying to screw me over? And at the time I thought, I don't understand, like, people aren't like that. They're very honest. But then I started to have dreams where we would have a big meeting with the big executive, and we want to get their sign off on a strategy we're proposing. And they would say yes in the meeting, and then on the back end say no on the email with the CEO. Right. So I would come in, I would go to the principal, and I would say, hey, how do we make sure he doesn't screw us over? So it's that cycle, right? That connection of like, okay, I get it. I see why he feels that way.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is it's at the end of the day, it's our life experiences
Yeah,
are bringing us to where we are, good or bad, right? So
that's right.
it's but it's ironic that it's the complexities in life that we take naturally.
Mhm.
Actually, they become the opportunities professionally, because we become conditioned to handle them,
Absolutely.
and it's a big deal. So this was great. I haven't had the kind of conversations that we just had for many years. It brought back a lot of memories, and frankly, I can do without that kind of experiences. Transportation, logistics, dealing with compliance. It's never fun, and you never know, and
Yeah.
it's never done until it's done. So it's but you are exactly in that space and expanding into Europe. So for anybody listening, you now know what to watch out for. So you've got the Amazon network, but go in knowing that it's only for test.
That's
Then
right.
you have to be ready. So this was great, Drey. So give us your contact information. How can people reach you?
Yeah, definitely. So anyone can reach me on LinkedIn, Drayton Hilton, DRE as in everything, YTON, Hilton like the hotel. And then of course, reach out by email. It's my last name, period, first name. So hilton.drayton@gmail.com. Always looking to help and provide support where I can. And, grateful for this opportunity to speak with you, Nick, and help out your audience.
Oh, it was great to have you, Drey. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you.
And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure and subscribe, rate, and review our show. And be sure and share an episode with a friend. And thank you so much for being with us today. We'll see you next week here on Amazon Legends.